Yeah, it's working fine, and you're good to go right at 6 whenever you're ready.
Okay. Nobody needs to see my law degree. Good evening and welcome to the City of Lansing Virtual Candidate Forum for the finalists for the position of Police Chief for the City of Lansing. My name is Gary Peterson. I'm the President, CEO, and Principal Recruiter for Public Sector Search and Consulting. While this forum is being streamed live on Facebook, it will also be available on demand after the event on both YouTube and Facebook. If you know someone who's not able to attend and watch this event, please share that with them, and it'll be available on those two platforms. As way of background, our firm was engaged by the City of Lansing to conduct a national search for the permanent police chief for the City of Lansing. As part of our process, we interviewed many different community stakeholders and stakeholders within the police department. We created a position profile based on the feedback we received and advertised in the position in the places you'd expect to find qualified candidates to compete for the position. We aggressively recruited several individuals to the search process. At the conclusion of the search, we screened all 20 candidates who applied for the position and presented several candidates to the city's search committee. Ultimately, candidates were interviewed by the search committee, and the field was reduced to the finalists you'll hear from tonight. While we are presenting the finalists tonight, they will be asked questions that were submitted by the community through an online survey tool. The questions tonight have been compiled, and the questions that were submitted from questions that were submitted. As is our normal process, the questions have been combined with similar questions and edited for clarity where appropriate. Not all questions will be asked. The format for this virtual forum is as follows. Each candidate will have an opportunity to take 4 or 5 minutes to introduce themselves. Then I'll ask the candidate several questions. We'll rotate the order so each candidate has the opportunity to go first. Each candidate will have 4 minutes per question, and I'll provide a 1-minute warning or a gentle reminder for them to wrap it up if they're going over. With that having been said, we're going to start with introductions. We're going to go alphabetically. So we're going to start with Jason Matson. Captain Matson, please introduce yourself to the Lansing community and tell them why you want to be their next police chief.
Okay. Well, thank you. First foremost, I just want to thank the community of Lansing for the opportunity to be able to share a little bit about myself and my philosophy, and ask for your consideration as the next chief for the Lansing Police Department. And so I just want to say, we are at an incredible time in our nation's history as it relates to law enforcement. And while some may see it as some challenges, where there's challenge, there's always opportunity. And so as I see it, we have a tremendous opportunity to work with one another to really bring forward policing into modern day, with meeting the expectations that our community have and how we can become a model for police agencies across the United States. Now, doing so is not going to be through easy conversations, and I easily recognize that. I also recognize that coming from an outside jurisdiction, that there will be relations that will have to be met and created. Lots of discussions, getting to know me, getting to know you, and really working on the whole forming, norming, storming that goes along with the creation of any team. But I'm confident at the other end of this that we will be a strong team that will definitely serve as a model there again, as I was saying, moving forward in policing across America. I want to say that I believe that Lansing is already beginning on a very solid foundation. As I've been doing my research, I've noticed that the Department of Justice throughout history has frequently referenced Lansing as a model agency as it relates to community relations. And while that doesn't mean that there's not opportunities to grow, one thing that it does say is that this has already been a very progressive, forward-moving agency. And with that is one of the things that I feel that is fit for me and what draws me to Lansing. So a little bit about my personal self, and then I'll go into my professional background. I am just as every one of you. I am a community member. I am a person that has grown up. I grew up in a single family home. I grew up with my mother. My father was an immigrant from Nigeria. He was deported back to Nigeria about 5 years ago. I never had the opportunity to meet him firsthand, so I grew up very much in a family home, a single family home. I grew up in poverty. I grew up standing in welfare lines. I lived in an area where I experienced things that have not been so good from the community, as well as law enforcement with regards to race relations. I've seen racism, I've seen bigotry, I've seen hatred, but with all of that, I've also seen the goodness in people. I'm a world traveler. I love to travel the world, and I love to meet new people. I've been to almost every state within the United States, and I've been to no short of about a dozen countries across this world, because I truly believe in the greatness of people. I've had the opportunity to go to Lansing just a few weeks ago, and I had an opportunity to meet a lot of the community members there, and then throughout Michigan for about a week. And so I see a lot of greatness in Michigan. So what I bring to you is a person that is going to fit right in with your community and where you're going. I'm a visionary leader, I'm a critical thinker, and I believe in collaboration. I have been educated here in California State University of Bakersfield, where I have a degree in business administration, an undergraduate degree, and then a graduate degree in public administration. I have worked for the Bakersfield Police Department for about 19 and a half years now. I have gone through all the ranks of officer all the way up to my current rank of captain. I have worked in various federal partnerships along the way. I've worked at the federal FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. I was an IRS SAR task force dealing with large scale money operations. I have worked as a DEA supervisor for the United States Drug Enforcement Agency. I have been a sergeant, patrol sergeant. I have been a lieutenant working in operations. I have worked in a variety of assignments in investigations and administration, where I have been currently a captain for the past 4 years. And so captains are, here in Bakersfield are very similar to that, the role of a chief. They're the chief of their own respective areas, you might say. So policy creation, policy presentations, policy discussions, the enforcement and management of our policy, policy development, working on training, education, resources needs, all of those things that are necessary for a chief to be able to bring to an organization. I have had ample opportunities to do so in our organization here in Bakersfield. Bakersfield is a relatively medium-sized to large agency, you might say, with over 500 sworn and about another 200 professional staff. We have a budget of about $130 million, and we're about 150 square miles. So with that, there's a lot of different things that go on in the community, a lot of different experiences, a lot of different trials, tribulations, but opportunities as well. And I'm hoping throughout the rest of this discussion that I'll have the ability to be able to share that a little bit more. So with that, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to there again having a further discussion with you.
Thank you, Captain Matson. Appreciate that. Interim Chief Sosby, please introduce yourself to the Lansing community and tell them why you want to be the permanent police chief in Lansing.
Thank you, Gary. I want to thank everybody for this opportunity to explain a little bit about myself and why I want to be the chief of police in Lansing. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ellery Sosby. I'm 45 years old. I'm married. I have 3 children. I am the interim chief here in Lansing, but I am technically the patrol captain. I overseen patrol since Captain Green left, and he asked me to bridge the gap between his retirement and the seating of the new police chief. I too grew up in a rural area that experienced poverty and struggle. I had a great family that taught me well and got me to where I am today. And I thank them both for that. My education lies at Michigan State University. I got a bachelor's in criminal justice. And I started my career in 1998 with aspirations to become a Lansing police officer from day one. I briefly worked at Meridian Township until I got the call to come over to LPD in 2002, where I served on the road as a road officer for approximately 10 years before I got promoted to the rank of sergeant. As a patrol sergeant, I oversaw night shift patrol mainly, and then I oversaw the quartermaster division, which oversees the largest budget within our department. I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant in 2014, where I served as a road lieutenant, a platoon commander. I also served as the XO, or the executive lieutenant under patrol. I also served as the director of Office of Internal Affairs as a lieutenant. I oversaw all the complaints in the department. I also served as the detective lieutenant, where I oversaw the detective bureau. When I was promoted to captain, I served as the staff services captain down in the administration portion of LPD until I took over for the patrol captain, which is the largest part of our department, through 2 of the most challenging and unprecedented years, probably in law enforcement history, is recent history anyway. Navigating through a pandemic, major political and social unrest, and on top of every other thing that comes with running a police department. I have been the honor guard commander for many years, overseeing that unit. I have been vastly involved in our emergency management for the department and the city. Events such as many natural disasters that we had, the tornadoes, the ice storms, the floods, COVID-19. Any large festivals that we have had and we do have in the city, such as Common Ground, 4th of July, Silver Bells, dignitary visits, demonstrations over the last 2 years. I had a touch in all of those as operational build. I've also been on our tactical team as an operator for 5 years and as a supervisor, and I have over 200 critical incidents on that team. I oversaw our detectives and our analysts in our crime room and civilian staff and support staff within. I have been responsible for resource reallocation in the last 2 years. Proposals that I have given the past 2 chiefs, such as our social worker unit, which we are continuing to build here at the Lansing Police Department, restructured our calls for service so that when we are called, we are available, and we have our officers available to be in the neighborhoods and out of their cars, so they're not tied up on all different calls. And a COVID restructure. I was crucial in implementing a restructuring plan, organizational restructure for our department when COVID hit as a mitigation strategy to keep our officers healthy and safe during that trying time. I want to be clear. I want to lead this department. I have the experience, the leadership, the ability, the training, and the confidence to be the leader that this department needs. This department, the Lansing Police Department, is community-oriented, data-driven, constitutional police department. Police officers are held to a higher standard. We accept that. We know that. We are not afraid at LPD to hold ourselves to that higher standard and hold each other accountable. We also need to know that when it's time to support our officers, we need the support as well. And we get that. When it's time to praise, we need to praise. We also need to be humble. And we are humble here in the Lansing Police Department. Life has a way of humbling if you're not. I've never been as proud as I am today as the interim chief as I've ever been in for the Lansing Police Department. I've always been proud, but I've never been as proud as I am today because I see all the good. I see all the bad, but I see all the good as well. And there's much more good than bad. Our support is unbelievable. I've touched pretty much every aspect of this police department based on my experience, my knowledge, the relationships that I've built and continue to build. I believe that I'm the right person for this job. I'm the right person for this department, and I'm the right person for this city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the first question is going to be for Captain Matson. Nationwide and in Lansing, there's a shortage of police officers. There are also concerns about systemic racism. Where do you see these two issues intersecting, and how will you address concerns around both issues?
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. Organizations struggle when they have a question about fit. And so I'm not talking about Lansing specific, but any organization. And so when people or when an organization finds itself having the ability to be able to bring in a candidate or an applicant to their organization, the question becomes why. And so if we look at what's going on today, you know, there's a question on really the whole community spectrum, right? Is that it's coming from internal as well as you might say external, is this question about fit. And what does fit mean? And so we, as I was saying in my opening, is that we have a tremendous discussion going on today about where policing is and what policing should be in America. We have seen generations of policing that is very different from today, where traditional policing, very much a crime control model, very much of an arrest, and we have moved much more to a very progressive model of trying to really focus on root causes of crime rather than the actual crime itself. And so with that, it's kind of put law enforcement in kind of a paradox about how to best wrangle with this decision. Is our job to be that of the front line to, you know, when crime is occurring, to deal with crime and to arrest offenders, or is it to be the on the backside when we're focusing more on the fundamental issues of crime that is going on? And this really is creating a lot of angst and I'd say concern, and, you know, as we're going through this discussion as a nationwide discussion. You know, but I say all of this is that if we circle back to where we are in law enforcement, is that we are built on a very solid foundation, a philosophical foundation. We have the guiding values or the guiding principles that are well defined in our law enforcement code of ethics about the role and responsibilities of law enforcement. We have the early ideals and principles of Sir Robert Peel, which has been basically the foundation of modern policing today. And, you know, where I see this going is really to focus on these ideas is, you know, to prevent crime and disorder is an alternative to, repression by military force. And this is the discussion. So what is, you know, this was all the way back into the 1800s. They recognizes that you have to focus on root issues in order to really be an effective law, to really have a true impact on crime. Education is key. Community partnerships is key. Those are principles that we can take away. Another idea, to seek and preserve public favor is not by pandering to public opinion, but constantly demonstrating the absolute impartial service to law enforcement. And so that means that we have to be a well-trained law enforcement agency that understands and respects the diversity of the communities that we have and meet the community demands. As they change, as we evolve, is that we evolve with them and to be able to maintain that. The next idea, to maintain all relationships at all times is of the utmost importance. Law enforcement is nothing more than an extension of the community. We are community members. We are not invading forces. We are not an occupying force. We have our kids go to the same schools. Our kids go to the same churches. We go to the same churches. We go to the same venues, all these interactions that go on. And so all of this I say is that, you know, this is the foundation of what we have before us, is this discussion and really trying to get to this understanding. We hear it being brought out through the idea of the concept of reconciliation. And so reconciliation is one of those, it sounds like a very scary word, because what does it really mean? It really means to bring together the idea of difference, that we have not always done it right in law enforcement, is that we have sometimes lost the way of what the community expects from us. And with that, there needs to be a recognition with that. that starts the first steps to going to all of these ideas that I was just laying out about us being one in the community, that we are all the same, is that we can then start to have dialogue about how do we move forward. If we try to create a wall of things that have not yet, or we perceive that things have not occurred that have occurred throughout history, well, then there's always going to be this level of skepticism, mistrust, distrust that is always going to be at the backbone of any conversation. And it's going to be very difficult to move forward any dialogue between community and law enforcement. This partnership is critical to moving forward modern day policing in order to be an effective law enforcement agency. And so with that, once we start to build that trust, once we start to have those dialogues, we are going to be able to better start dealing with what is going on. Fit. How do people feel that they can fit into an organization? The only way to really have a true and strong recruitment and retention program is to have a true reflection of the agency, be a reflection of the community. As I was doing my research, Lansing, there again, I applaud Lansing, has done very well, demographically speaking. There's room for improvement, but as I was looking, the demographics are about 61% white in for Lansing, and about 75% representation of the police force is white. Black is 23 for Lansing, 14 for their police force. Other races is kind of a conglomerate of various races, about 14%, and there again, Lansing's about 11%. So, compared to other agencies across America, it's actually well, and I know it's been applauded for being the most diverse agency in the mid-Michigan area. But there are still opportunities to improve that. And so it's getting out there, it's getting those, building those relations, it's having those dialogue, those difficult conversations that I was talking about. Me coming from the outside, being able to have the ability to talk and to learn and be critical is going to be, necessary. As I'm wrapping up, I just want to say is that how do we help continue to move that forward is once we start getting better representation in the ranks that more reflect the community, well, we also need to make sure that that is properly progressed upwards with women, with minorities into the supervisor or managerial ranks to ensure that we have true diversity of perspective going into that. I plan to do that through succession planning, through mentoring programs, through develop partnerships with the local community, business, nonprofit, education, religious areas to really create strong community partners in this mentor program. And then last but not least, and then I'll wrap up, is this idea of focusing on the youth, continuing to expand the focus of education. Education is the key to suppressing and dealing with crime. And the more we can get our educational programs out there and get more partners and develop education, ensuring that students are properly going to school, getting educated, dealing with traumas and a lot of different things, the better all of this is going to be a successful program for all.
Thank you. Chief Sosebee, same question, and I'll repeat it for you. Nationwide and in Lansing, there's a shortage of police officers. There are also concerns about systemic racism. Where do you see those two issues intersecting, and how will you address concerns around both issues?
That's a great question, Gary. I appreciate it. Look, I'm not naive. Clearly there's disparate representation of people of color in our criminal justice system. The data is there, the data shows it. But today's workforce and today's police force has never been more diversified, educated, trained, and particularly in biases. Today's recruits that we are seeing are the most educated, the most tolerant, the most accepting, the most intolerant to racism and bias than we have seen in our history. If our system is broken, and in some cases it is, it needs help, it needs reform, we will not get good educated individuals that will work in law enforcement. And that is crucial for the law enforcement field and our city, our state, our country to move forward in a happy marriage. And as chief of police here in the Lansing Police Department, I want the best human beings that I can get as officers. So the most well-rounded, compassionate, empathetic, honest human beings that I can get. Because I believe, and I truly believe, that if you have that, you have a good person that does the right thing for the right reason. And that's why you become a police officer. And that's what I want in the Lansing Police Department. Once we get the best human beings that we can get, the thought of systemic racism will stop. And it's not anywhere in the near future. I'm a realist. But there's a way, an avenue to get there, and it's through education. Captain Madsen said it. It's through education, 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 education. You know, we have guidance on this. We have the 21st century policing model. We have the Margia model here in the city of Lansing for racial justice and equity. You know, we live by the words of Sir Robert Peel, and you know how the community is the police and the police are the community. That's what we live by here. Once we get our good human beings to police the way that we should be policing, by the community, for the community, with the community, we will make leaps and bounds towards that equity. Is it a factor? Yes, it is. Yes, it is a factor. Do I see it getting better? Yes, I do, because it's recognized. It's not tolerated anymore. And I think people are just fed up with it. And we're rounding the corner. Eyes are open, ears are open, and people are learning. I've always said, if you're not learning something every day, you're wasting your time. And I truly believe that. I believe one day we will get back to where we have 300 applicants for one position. We're not there yet, but we will get back there. You know, part of that is we need to fall back on, back in 2015, we were nationally recognized for our recruiting based on how we recruit. We recruit through a little bit of like a baseball farm system. We have explorers where we go into our community. We go into our schools, they're local kids. And then they move into the cadet program. And then we possibly move them into a recruit program for those that can't afford to pay for the academy. You know, homegrown kids that grow into productive adults who are good human beings that will help us solve this problem of systemic racism and the shortage of officers that we have, not only here in Lansing or in Michigan, but nationwide. And I believe it's right around the corner. We're getting there. We're not there yet. We got a lot of work to do. But the point is that it's recognized, it's accepted, and it's accepted that the bad and the racism is not accepted. And that's what I look forward to doing here as the Chief of Police in Lansing.
Thank you. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. You're going to go first this time. Please tell us what takeaways you would want department members to get out of diversity and sensitivity training.
Okay. Well, first of all, we have had diversity and sensitivity training in the Lansing Police Department for years. You know, we have had numerous times where we have annual training where we come and have implemented these new trainings to educate our officers and show them a possibility of how to look at things in different ways. We have to educate. We talk about training all the time. Training is great, but what I'd like to do is educate. You need to educate yourself. We can always show you how to do something tactically, but to educate you on process is more important to me. And you know, we need to look at things such as emotional intelligence. You know, how you control your emotions, how you identify your emotions, how you can identify how to handle emotions of others that are around you, so that those triggers are noted and that things don't escalate into something that they shouldn't. Emotional intelligence is a huge, huge thing that we need to encompass and learn more about and educate ourselves more about in law enforcement in general. We also need to, I hope that we get more active listening training. You know, I tell everybody, you know, we listen to understand. We don't listen to respond. We have to have patience. You know, people, when they meet us, typically law enforcement, they're not having a great day. Sometimes it's the worst day of their lives. And we need to have empathy for that. And we need to show them that we are there to listen and to help them, because that's what we're really there for. I want them to understand that we, you know, and get training on microaggressions and be able to identify that in somebody so that those triggers aren't hit and that we don't escalate into something that we shouldn't. We have to educate our officers on disparities too. You know, there are times when we don't understand because we just don't know. You know, that's why we send our officers, our new recruits, to the Jim Crow Museum and the Holocaust Museum in our orientation weeks. You know, there are disparities. There's no question there are disparities. But what do we do about that? How do we get those disparities to match up with what our community is diversity-wise? Education, education, education. That's how we do it. We learn. We have to learn. I want them to get educated from training, not just go through and sit through the training, but take something away from it that's tangible, actionable, that they can use in their job, that will help them become better people, better police officers, and all around better person. And to change that perception that, you know, that we're just cops and we're just robots in uniforms that just come and take calls and arrest people. You need to change that perspective. And that is through education.
Thank you. Captain Mattson, please tell us what takeaways you would want department members to get out of diversity and sensitivity training.
Thank you for the question. First and foremost is that there needs to be a recognition that every single human has a bias. As much as we would prefer to say that we don't, we all do. You know, we all come with perceptions from when we grow up, from the various of young of age, all the experiences, our religions, our cultures, our, you know, our education, everything starts to create filters about how we see the world. And with that, we start to then put perceptions together about how to best respond to the world based on our interpretation of it. That is the implicit bias that we all have, that we each have. Those things, as Chief Sosby said, is critical to understanding the very basic concept of what emotional intelligence is all about. Is that at the end of the day, is understanding those things allows us, once we become self-aware, we can then self-manage. And that is what is critical for every single individual, is to be out there, to be the true professional that they are expected to be. When they go out there, is that people will come with all kinds of different perceptions about police, perceptions about community, perceptions about situations or whatever. We cannot allow ourselves and our biases to override our better judgment to suppress what another person is feeling, and that somehow ours overrides theirs. And so, because if so, then we start to change our behaviors and how we interact with them and help them and encourage them and help them get through the trials and tribulations that they find themselves in. And so if we understand this, then we can start becoming better interactive with our community. And the more, and the best way to do that is to really open yourself up. You know, recognize that you have these biases and expose yourself to as many different people as you can. It's what I said in my very introduction, is about why I love to travel this country and why I love to travel this world, is that I want to learn and understand more people and understand the differences that people bring to the table. It allows me to be a better leader. It allows me to be a better educator. It allows me to be a better interactive and community member and just a person all around, is to be appreciative of those. And even with my own biases that I have with me. And so as I wrap, this up, it then allows us to become what is the foundational piece of most law enforcement training today. And that's the concept of procedural justice, is that once you understand all of these things, you can be a better officer. You can go out there, you could treat people with fairness. And so as they are going through the situation, that you treat them openly and fairly, and you appreciate where they're coming from. You're transparent. You're able to openly communicate and explain the why you're doing what you're doing, or appreciate, or why you're having the conversation that you're having with them. You allow them the opportunity for voice, right? Chief Sosby said very well, is that, we oftentimes we listen to respond rather than listen to learn. And if we give people voice, then we may actually just learn something new about that community and about that interaction, and be a better problem solver for the situation that we're brought there for in the first place. So allowing opportunity to have voice, because all of that, and once we become self-aware and we have the fairness and transparency, then we can have the impartial decision-making that is expected of us, that we don't allow those personal biases and perceptions that we have dictate, but we can, the necessary response that we think that should be there, but coming with a much more open-minded and critical thinking level of impartiality in our decision-making. And if I can get our officers to understand this concept, from what I was saying, from its inception about who we are as individuals all the way to the outward behavior, it's going to be so critical into building those relationships out there in the community, because it's all comes full circle.
Thank you, Captain Mattson. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. Currently, Lansing has seen an increase in dangerous speed racing, speeding, and reckless driving. How would you evaluate the problem, and what strategies would you consider when formulating a plan to reduce these violations or occurrences?
So we have very much have this same problem in Bakersfield. And so as we could see on any Friday, Saturday night, upwards 300, 400, 500 cars out going to our local strip malls and starting their speed racing exhibitions, going up and down the main corridors, where we've had several accidents all the way up to ending in death because of this very reckless behavior. This is not an easy problem, because it's one of those that you just continuously chase all over, kind of all over the place. But how you do it is that, you're going to have community partners. So one of the first things that we did is, when we start to see a lot of this problems, and what I would bring to Lansing, is that we go to the business owners. We work with the business owners, because a lot of times if we could stop the loitering from the first place, we can start to then deal with a lot of things. So we've worked with the businesses, and a lot of the businesses are kind of these big corporations that have attorneys. So we get involved with the attorneys, and we work on creating letters, trespass letters, that basically prohibit the loitering in the first place for these behaviors, to then start escalating into the street exhibition racing and so on and so forth. We have worked with the businesses to put up various type of environmental factors, such as speed bumps, chains, and chaining off corridors when these corridors are not being utilized. And so having the injunctions, having the ability to be able to cite early on, and to prevent a lot of these gatherings to start from happening, become one of the first and foremost. Because if we don't have that, then we kind of have to wait for the reckless behavior to occur and see in our behavior, but by that point, now you have hundreds, if not thousands, of people out there, and it's just a extreme mess. So having the partners of the businesses and the community on board from the early is very key to hopefully preventing a lot of these gatherings from starting to build early on. We do deal with the targeted enforcement beyond that. We do put up a lot of our speed trailers that have a lot of our cameras, our LPR cameras, that will identify them. And so once they know that they're identified, even if we don't see them right away, is we can go back and we can review a lot of this, and we can get those license plates, and we can go back proactively and be able to deal with these suppression factors and stuff that go on, and follow up with the investigations based on any reckless behaviors that are going on, and submit for criminal complaints. Because there's just not enough officers when you have 300 or 400 cars to be able to stop every car. People are eventually going to get away. They're going to go to other locations, and they're going to continue that behavior. So, as I'm saying, just to kind of wrap up, is having the community partners early on, stopping those gatherings from growing in the first place to where they are, dealing with the targeted enforcement, and with a lot of the trailers and stuff, and then dealing with a lot of the investigative side. One of the other things that I would say to do, though, is that, you're seeing a lot of agencies work with and create partnerships where different racetracks will open up their facilities to allow street racing to occur. So we have a drag strip out here called Famosa Speedway, or Button Willow Raceway. And a lot of these have been areas that we have been trying to work on, maybe creating an alternative. So finding the leadership of some of these different clubs and these different groups, and trying to encourage them to take their racing to more appropriate areas, such as a confined area, such as a racetrack, to be able to otherwise do the things that they're trying to do. So our council has been very supportive of even trying to help, work and establish that. So, that's more on the flip side of a more proactive way, is working with the groups as well, to try to find alternative means rather than public streets, where it's going to be a danger to themselves as well as the rest of the community, and get it into more appropriate venues such as racetracks to otherwise do their venues. So hopefully, between a reactive and a proactive measure, you can really try to do the best you can to suppress a lot of this type of action.
Thank you very much. Chief Sosby, same question, and I'll repeat it. Currently, Lansing seeing an increase in dangerous speed racing, speeding, and reckless driving. How do you evaluate the problem, and what strategies would you consider when formulating a plan to reduce these violations?
Thank you, Gary. There's no question that COVID, when the roads were empty, because everybody was at home. Traffic enforcement is at an all-time low as a mitigation strategy. The roads in the city of Lansing and all over the country became racetracks. Unfortunately, now that people are back to work and moving out and about on the roadways, the racetracks are still there. And we are seeing an abnormal increase in traffic accidents and traffic fatalities here in the city of Lansing and in the state. We have enacted what we called Operation Slowdown this summer, and it continues now to initiate traffic stops on many of our larger roads that have the speeding issues. And we must find a way to stop the accidents and the fatal accidents. We've used visual deterrence. We continue to use visual deterrence. We are not hiding. We want them to see the officers. We want the drivers to see the visual deterrence. We have signage that we put out. We have construction trailers with messages on them. We have our banners. We have a great relationship with our local media. They have more than once helped us out with putting out special notifications that LPD will be running traffic on King and Holmes on this state at this time. We fall back on our DDAC zone for traffic enforcement because we know the data shows that works and that saves lives. Again, we're not hiding. We want to be out there. We have reached out to our partners, area partners, the state police, the Ingham County Sheriff's Office to help us out with our visual deterrent and our enforcement on our streets. And I think we're rounding the corner on it. Is it still a problem? Yes, it is. And we need to do a lot more. Unfortunately, we're not out there to get tickets, to get arrests. We're out there to keep people healthy and safe on our roads. And, that's our goal. And we will do anything that we can to get that mission accomplished. So there are many different avenues that we can approach on this. But the biggest thing is we need cops out there to do it. And I have restructured, I mentioned it earlier, I restructured the calls for service. That was, we want to get not only officers out in our communities and out in our neighborhoods, but have the ability to do some proactive enforcement and keep our streets safe. It doesn't affect you until it affects you. When somebody that you know or love gets injured in these crashes, and then it becomes a big deal. But we want to avoid that. We don't want that to happen. We want to get out in front of this. We want to tame that issue. And we've looked into many options through our Department of Public Works. We've talked about possibly traffic calming situations such as curvature roads, speed bumps. LPD has several speed trailers. We are applying for grants for additional speed trailers. There are many options and many avenues that we are taking proactively to get this under control in the city. And hopefully soon that we will. And our streets will be back safe like they used to be.
Thank you very much for that answer. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. Lansing has experienced a surge in shootings, particularly with young people. What strategies would you employ to address youth gun violence?
That is a very good question. Well, we currently have many current strategies on how to, let me back up. What we're seeing is a rise in violence, a rise in gun violence specifically. It's contributing to a lot of factors. It's contributing to COVID. It's contributing to our kids not being in school, our after-school activities being canceled, our community engagements being canceled. And on top of that, we have an abundance of guns that have been purged through our community. Due to the political, social unrest that we've had in the last 2 years, it's no secret that guns purchases are through the roof, not only in Lansing, but nationally. We need to strengthen and continue and strengthen the current strategies that we have in place through engagement, through identification, trying to find the root cause of why we have this issue, And we need to understand, and I say we as a community need to understand as a city that we are at a crucial point for community engagement. It's crucial. We have to have open lines of communication between our community and our law enforcement and our police department. Because of COVID, we have not been able to get out into our communities like we have in the past. We used to do 300 to 400 community engagements a year in the Lansing Police Department, and those drastically dropped during COVID. And I contribute a rise in this violence to that, because these young individuals are not comfortable with law enforcement right now because we haven't had that engagement with them. We must attack this violence problem in the city together, the police department and the community, because if we don't, neither one of us will succeed. We won't succeed as law enforcement. We won't be able to keep our city safe, and the community won't keep their children, their friends, their families safe, because that violence will grab you and that will touch you in some fashion. We need to continue our mentoring programs that we have here in the city. We have our CSU unit that does community engagements. I mentioned it before, 300-400 a year. We are up to 2,800 hours of community service for community engagement events just this year. And that's not what we had in years past. We've had much higher. We have mentor programs such as One Love Global with Pastor Holland, who I know personally. We have our GREAT program, which is our gang resistance and education curriculum that we teach in the Lansing School District. We have our PAL program, our Police Athletic League. These are all things that have been not utilized recently because of the pandemic. We also have other mentoring programs like Mikey 23, which is a construction mentoring program that's done wonders for youth and gives them an alternative to violence. Lansing has a violence problem, but what Lansing really has is a gun problem. We take the guns out of it. We have assaults. We don't have deaths. Unfortunately, with the uptick in guns that have been pushed into our community, these individuals, and unfortunately they're younger, they have no forethought, they have no forward thought of consequence. What they do now, they don't care about what happens tomorrow. They don't care about what happens to grandma, what mom and grandma and dad and brothers and sisters and cousins have to deal with if they quickly pull that trigger right now. It's too convenient. We need to take a stand on gun security. We need to have less access to guns as for our youth. And we need to educate our youth of the consequences of their actions. You know, I have three young boys. And I can tell you from experience, there's no forward thought. There's no consequence. There's no, oh, if I do this today, what happens tomorrow, next week, in 10 years? We have to educate them so that they understand. And maybe it doesn't come from law enforcement. Maybe it comes from the community. Maybe it comes from faith leadership. Maybe it comes from the school. Maybe it comes from a social worker. But they have to have that education to understand the consequence that their actions have. And I think that's how we start. And I think that's how we get to where we need to be to make these our youth violence issue not as an issue as it is.
Thank you. Captain Matson, it's the same question for you. Lansing's experienced a surge in shootings, particularly with young people. What strategies would you employ to address youth gun violence?
So this comes down to a very, very complex issue that's not going to be addressed overnight, undoubtedly. You have to get at the root cause, and the root cause is breaking the cyclical pattern of generational violence, lack of opportunity for employment, so higher levels of unemployment, lower education rates, lower participation in schools, and things of that nature. And this stuff starts having a feeding effect from one generation to the next. And so when you don't have learned behavior to an alternate path or an alternate opportunity, you only know what you are experiencing and what is the environment that is in front of the person. And so the environmental factors have to change. We have to be able to work with our community partners. This is to be able to really get down at the root issue, which is the family structure, focusing on helping families deal with things anywhere from parenting to social skills, interactions, job opportunities, and education, making sure kids are getting to education programs instead of being out on the streets or not going to school, truancy issues. COVID has only complicated that because now there's a lot of, stay at home, because you're exposed and you got to be, and so it's only made the bad situation worse is that with the COVID issues that are going on. But nevertheless, that still doesn't change the underlying issues. And that's the issues of the environmental issues and the family structure issues at home that are helping to participate in this outward behavior, which is what we're seeing with the gun violence issue. So how do we get the clinicians? And you'll hear the kind of the word of the focus of defund police or whatever and stuff like that. I really call, the concept of defund maybe a reallocation of monies. And so, while we can continue to hire on more officers and we need to hire more officers, we can also talk about other ways to use monies. And one of them is getting more clinicians to deal with underlying traumas that go on in schools, working with families to get the family support, basic parental skills that, maybe we just take for granted that we think everybody knows and understands. But if you don't know from one generation to the next, how do you not know what you don't know? And so being able to have those support mechanisms early on in families and getting them the jobs, getting them the parental supports and stuff like that is critical. Once we do have the kids in school, we have to be able to have the counselors there. We have to be able to have the mentors there. We have to be able to have those leaders, those youth leaders, those community leaders there to help build life decision or life skills, I guess. Life coping skills is the word I'm trying to say. Cognitive abilities are the most influential time is going to be from early adolescence, all the way through about 16, 17, 18 years old. That's why most of the time we try not to incarcerate people under the age of 18, right? Because they don't know what they don't know. Their cognitive is still learning, reasoning, and morality, which is the understanding of right and wrong. And so if they're not being exposed to morality training or morality discussions, they're not being taught reasoning and how to make good decisions and consequence of bad decisions and stuff, then we're failing them. We're failing our kids. And so they're going to go out there. They're going to continue to go out there because they don't have any other thought. There's no accountability that, as Chief Sosby said, there's a lack of accountability, because they don't know what they don't know. And it's probably because of the lack of the parental support from the very beginning. And so, while we try to help with our community leaders or religious leaders or, and helping to build family support, we can also work with the schools to get that cognitive reasoning skills and training and stuff that's so critical for early adolescence. And then we got to give them opportunities. So, as Chief Sosby said, things such as the Police Activities League. We have programs here, Junior Police Academy, where we have all the way from about the age of 10 all the way through the age of about 18, these programs to where they go through leadership training. They go through a lot of morality training. They go through cognitive reasoning skills and stuff to learn a lot of the basics during summer programs, keeping them off the streets, keeping them occupied. After school sports, we take advantage of the concept of after school sports, but that keeping people busy, keeping those kids busy in more productive things rather than leave it up to their own devices to run the streets are critical. So those type of programs are also just as critical in being able to support. But I'm going to circle back as the foundational piece. If you really want to combat gang violence and you want to combat youth violence and stuff, it starts at the home. And we got to put more emphasis with our community partners at home. And that's where one of the biggest things I would start is, focusing on as the Lansing's chief is really starting to build those partnerships and focus on that foundation. And then everything else builds from there.
Thank you. And Captain Matson, we're going to stay with you for the next question. You're going to go first. As the chief of police, how do you envision your relationship with the mayor and the city council?
Very simple. I work at the will of the people, and the people choose their counselors, they choose their mayors. And so through an extension, they are my bosses, and the council and the mayor are my bosses and working on behalf of the people. And so my job is to work candidly. My job is to bring forward a law enforcement perspective to the mayor and to the council about what I see about best issues or best practices and the issues that from a law enforcement perspective, working with them as a collaborative partner to develop solutions, meaningful solutions, not just transactional solutions, but really focusing on root cause issues, whether it's, to address the violence and the crime and all of these things that we have been talking about for the, so far today. And so it's a true partnership, and it's working with all the city leaders. I understand police in most jurisdictions are a significant portion of the budgets, and I have to be respectful of the fiduciary responsibilities above and beyond that go on to run a city. And so the council has many other stakeholders and many other focuses beyond public safety, although public safety being one of them. And so I can't come in there just as a demanding of all resource because we're police and law enforcement and everything else. And so that's where the collaboration and the partnerships really work at. And so my job is to bring forward also the best ideas, the best processes, what technologies are out there that maybe will help us be able to have more return on our investment for every dollar that we're expending. And so using AI technology for report writing, for example, and what things like that, the increased capacities of BWC and for transparency. So all of these different technologies and stuff that can help amplify, those are the ideas. Those are the things I need to be able to bring back to the mayor, to the council, to say, how does that integrate with the needs of being a transparent agency, with being a responsive agency that's dealing with the concerns of the people, and then work, and to respect the decisions that are made by the mayor and the council, and then to go out and to implement those strategies, whatever that final decision may be. But as I was saying, it's not to pander or anything else, but it's to be direct. And so it's to bring forward direct conversation with the mayor, to bring forward direct conversation with council, not in a challenging way or an insubordinate way, but to be open about and be transparent about what the realities are, because only as a fully informed leadership team of the council and the mayor, as informing them as much as I can about all of these things, including staffing, including, and all these other resource management issues, can they then make the best decisions that they feel possible. And then once we go through that discussion and the final path is made, then, like I said, my job is to go out there and work on behalf of the council and the mayor to get that done in support of the people.
Great, thank you. Thanks, sir. Chief Sosebee, same question as the chief of police. How do you envision your relationship with the mayor and the city council?
Thank you, Gary. I'll be very blunt and to the point. I believe that initially you need to set clear expectations. I've always thought that be the right way, the right avenue to start out a job, whether it's a job out of high school or chief of police. My expectations to the city council, to the mayor of the city, and what their expectations are of me, what their expectations are of the police department, what their expectations are of the relationship that their police department and their community will have. We all have a boss. Captain Madsen said it. We all answer to somebody. Understanding that relationship, understanding that I have officers' concerns, no different than they have constituent concerns. That understanding that we have to compromise, that we have to come to a neutral common ground for the benefit of the police department, the city, the community, us as a whole, the holistic view of how this relationship works. That understanding, that basic ground understanding that we have to work together to complete the mission. We have to be able to compromise. We have to understand each other's goals, each other's missions. And I think we do, at least in my case. I believe I have the support of our city council. I believe I have the support of our mayor. I believe they support us. I support them. I think that they understand that they have a good police department. That can get better, but it's pretty good right now. They should be very proud of our police department, like I am. At the end of the day, we're on the same team, and we have to understand that. We have a common goal. We have a common mission is to have fundamental fairness within our city, to have equity, respect, and justice with our department and our community. That whole constitution of policing, to where we have everybody is treated with fairness and equity, and having that truly that holistic view of how we should work with each other. Like I said, like Kevin Madsen said, I understand that I want them to be able to trust me as the chief of police, that when I come to them with concerns, that they're valid concerns. If I come to them saying, I need more police officers, they understand that I need more police officers. I just don't want more police officers. The city needs more police officers. Maybe I need more social workers. Maybe I need more professional health in our schools. Maybe we used to have SROs in the Lansing School District, and we don't have those right now currently. But maybe the footprint in our schools isn't an officer in a uniform. Maybe it's a social worker. The city council, the mayor, they have to trust me to understand that I think that that's the best allocation for resources at this given time that helps our community, helps our kids in the cities, in the schools in our city, to properly get that education so they can be productive adults. We have to have that trust. And if we both have that trust, and I also, on the other side of that, I have to trust them. I have to have that understanding and that trust with them that when they ask me to do something, that it's not just for a personal agenda. It's for the betterment of our community and our city. And I think if we have that trust, which I believe we do, that relationship will only grow and prosper and make our community a better place.
Thank you. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. What types of programs would you put in place to ensure improved officer health and wellness?
Okay, thank you. That's a big topic right now in law enforcement in general. When we talk about PTSD, we talk about dependencies. If I had a mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, physically healthy staff, we would have a harmonious police department. That would be a big part of the pie that that we would overcome a lot of obstacles with. That's not the case. Now our job is a hard job. Our officers, any officers, see things on a daily basis that some people can't fathom. These officers have families. That is hard for them to put themselves in a position where they have a small child and they see something bad happen to a small child. And how do you deal with that? How do you go on to the next call after seeing something like that? You don't just get a pass. You don't just get to go home. You have to deal with it, and you need help. You can't be the rough and tough cops of old and say, I'm good, I got it. That's just not acceptable anymore. And we have to understand that. We'll get back to the education part. We have to educate ourselves. Many officers don't understand that. That's why we talk about emotional intelligence. We have to understand how that works. Once we can understand how do we manage our own emotions and identify the problem, then that's the first step. We have guidance on this. We have our MRJEA. We have our 21st century policing pillars that give us guidance on how we handle and move forward with officer wellness. We have a very, very high rate of alcoholism and suicide in law enforcement. That's known nationally. That's not just here, it's known nationally. Here at LPD, we've implemented mandatory evaluations, mental evaluations for our officers through our collective bargaining. Once a year, you are required to sit down with a professional expert and discuss any problems. And you may not have any problems, you may not want to discuss any problems, but that option is there. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of removement of that stigma to say that, you know what, I do need some help. And this will help them. And as chief, I encourage this. I want more officer wellness because I see it as a negative trend in our profession. And if we don't do something about it now, we are way behind the ball on it, and it's much harder to catch up. And in the meantime, we are losing good, productive, valuable people in our departments nationwide to mental wellness. We have to consider new avenues of treatment. We can't just say that we're good. What we've done is good enough. You know, these things can't just stop. Once we get a good idea, we have to continue. We have to do better. We have to find a better way of doing it. We have to support our officers. If there's anything that is most important from the Patrol 1, PO1 officer, up from my job is support. It is, I feel that it is my job as the chief of police and as a captain to give them the support they need. If that doesn't happen, I'm not doing my job. If they don't succeed, I don't succeed. Little things to them are big things to me. So it's important. If it's important to them, it's important to me, and it needs to take a priority. And that's my stance on officer wellness. And I hope to continue to progress that with the Lansing Police Department as the chief.
Thank you very much. Okay. Captain Mattson, what types of programs have you put in place to ensure or improve officer health and wellness?
Yeah, so to me, we have 3 pillars. We have spiritual, we have emotional, and we have the physical component. And so all of these things need to be addressed. And so from the spiritual side, we have our chaplain program, and I would continue to encourage the growth of chaplain programs, working with our clergy to be able to help. Our people, our men and women go through a lot of horrific scenes and accidents and see all kinds of trauma, and all of that can't be forgotten. And sometimes it gets us to start questioning things such as faith and stuff that is critical, regardless of what religion you may have. And so if that is a need, then those programs, then we need to have our support in place. And so having our chaplain programs, not only for the community, but for ability for our officers, if need be, to be able to utilize that support. From the emotional and wellness side of the house, peer support programs. And so, we have a very robust peer support. I've been in charge for many years of all of this program. And so we have grown to where we have about 30 officers that are dedicated, and professional staff as well, that are dedicated as peer support members, to where our staff can go to them with confidence and confidentiality to be able to discuss things. And there's laws, at least as it relates to here in the state of California, that that they do have protections to not have to disclose a lot of the conversation unless it's some specific criminal or issue that has to be disclosed otherwise to the organization. So there's a lot that can be shared with confidence and confidentiality under this type of program. And so it becomes a good pointer system to be able to help them point people into appropriate resources and getting them the appropriate help that they need. In addition to that, we have our physical fitness committee, and physical fitness is a good component to overall mental wellness, but also physical health. And so putting together various type of competitions and workout programs. I have worked on getting several of our officers CrossFit certified, which CrossFit is now kind of the big thing, at least out here in Western United States, a lot of these CrossFit gyms. And so we have put a lot of our people through and gotten them now certified. I've gotten them certified as trainers. And so they come back and they put together fitness classes. We're putting together yoga classes. I've been talking to some people about fly fishing as a therapy session. And I've been sending a lot of our dispatch and our professional staff to various, anywhere from horseback riding, where there's mental wellness training goes into it, to canoeing, to just about anything, to be able to get our people a break and to get them out there and to get them mentally well. And so there's always a mental wellness component that goes on to this. All this has to be funded. And so, a lot of agencies, early, and ours included, had not put the money that was necessary early on as required to really be able to have a robust wellness program. So we sought out a lot of government funds. There's been a lot of federal and state funds and grants available to help with this. But for the first, now we're into year 2, we have actually made it a significant line item budget, where we're dedicating well over $100,000 of line item budget each year into that, to be able to deal with all kinds of wellness for our professionals and sworn staff. We're bringing in financial support, where we're bringing financial trainers, because a lot of times we have very young officers, and all of a sudden they come into very much a windfall of a salary, and they go out and they buy trains, planes, automobiles. And I say that facetiously, but before they know it, they're overextended. and credit. And so the stress that goes into that affects relationships, marriages. And so just the financial stress. So we bring in financial training, we bring in cooking. And so, cook and meal prep. We're working on bringing in meal prep for people to be able to buy meal prep instead of going through fast food, buying it at a reduced rate. So what I say is that there's a lot of different programs that are out there that we're actively seeking. And you have to have a dedicated person that goes into this. And so I have brought on a dedicated supervisor at the rank of sergeant to actually be in charge of our wellness program that oversees this entire operation. Through grant funding, I was able to bring in support staff, which was a retired officer, and we brought her back on as support staff into this to be able to help continue the administrative side of all of this, because it doesn't just make itself happen. There's a lot of administrative need that goes into it. And if you really want to have a true robust program, you got to be able to make it readily available, confidential, and last but not least is technology. So we've sought out through a private vendor an app that gives resources to clinicians, to different things such as emotional support, videos, counseling services of all different types, anywhere from all these things I've been talking about, including divorce, marriage counseling and relationship counseling, through whatever thing that you may need. And it's also available to the family, because we forget is that the impact that of an officer's life or professional staff member's life has on the family. This is not an easy job, and it oftentimes, as much as we want to not bring it home, we bring it home. And so the impact on the family, so being able to have these resources extended to the family only makes a better officer and a better professional staff at the end of the day. So you have to have a very robust program if you want to have a true meaningful officer that's going to be out there and be mentally and physically well, to be able to not overreact or underreact to situations that they may find themselves in because of any personal, mental, or emotional illness or stress or issues that they have going on. And so very much a needed program. I'm very much an advocate and would very much continue to move that forward as a top priority as chief of Lansing.
Thank you, Captain Matson. We're going to stay with you for the next question. What are your thoughts on the concept of defunding the police?
Yeah, so kind of like what I said earlier with the word of reconciliation, there's a lot of terms that are being thrown out all over the place right now as we're going through this discussion about what modern day policing is going to look like. And a lot of these words, because they get misused or misconstrued, or we look at each word or each differently, creates all kinds of different conversations. And so I just look, I always look up the words, what is the word defund? The word defund, as it's defined in the dictionary, is to prevent a group or organization from continuing to receive funds. If you take that in its purest sense, I equate that to the synonymous term of abolishing. So if it's the idea is to abolish law enforcement, I would say that is a fallacy. No modern society in the world has gone away from having a policing force, and that would be a complete travesty in responsiveness and dereliction of duty as government officials to look on behalf of the people to defund or to abolish a law enforcement agency. So I wholeheartedly would say that it's in the purest of sense, it's a travesty to think of that. Now, if you're talking about taking funds and reallocating them to other needs or other resources, where maybe we don't hire one officer and instead we hire 3 clinicians, well, that might be a different discussion, and that's a discussion to be had, right? Is that, for example, here in Bakersfield, I have sought out the idea of having a clinician in our communication center. So a trained mental health practitioner that is now working in our dispatch center. About 30 to 40% of our 300,000 plus calls per year per service, 30 to 40,000 of our 300,000 to 400,000 calls for service a year go back to mental wellness or mental illness issues type of calls, check the welfare type of calls. So about 10% of our call volume is related to that. And that's 30 to 40,000 calls that our officers are going out to that they're not trained clinicians to really be able to deal with. And sometimes they then turn into conflicts that then become a criticism of the interaction between law enforcement and a mentally ill person. And so why put our officers in that position? Why put our community in our position if there's better resources and better trained people to be able to deal with that, where an officer never needs to be there? And so we have been working on, and I have successfully been able to get a pilot project going here and through the funding of council, our city council, to have a trained mental health clinician to where we're diverting those type of calls and they're handling those type of calls over the phone. We're working with technology. So they're again, bringing technology, telehealth, and being able to interact through iPads and to be able to, to where an officer will never be dispatched to that call. So now that officer that would otherwise be tied up in a non-criminal call that probably not trained to be able to properly handle in the first place, they can go out and deal with what they need to deal with. And that's the calls of criminal actions and danger to society that are in progress to where law enforcement is needed. And so if you're talking about a defund in the way of reallocating funds, maybe, and they're again, not hiring one officer to get 4 or 5 clinicians, that to me makes that's a very reasonable discussion that we should have, because we should look at other options and we should look at options to bring in best trained people to deal with those type of situations. So, we talk about that. We talk about and our violence. We talked earlier about violence. We are hiring a victim advocate to go out and work with victims of violent crime. So when they are victims of shootings, victims of violent, these other violent assaults, is that we send advocates out there to work with them, to help deal with and bring all the support and the resource that they need, right? All the things that we were talking about early on about what is contributing to the likelihood in the first place. And so those are dollars that we could hire an officer, but instead we're hiring an advocate to go out there and be a better return. One, they come from the community, better trust with the community. Homelessness, the same idea. We have one of the most robust homeless outreach programs in the nation, and it's dealing with, and we hire these homeless outreach clinicians and stuff, and we contract with them to be able to otherwise go out there and work on our behalf as the trained resource and the trained experts. Private security, working with our downtown business association, so we contract with private security to be able to help give a footprint of visual deterrence of a lot of low-level offenders. So I say all of this is that this type of discussion could be had is where we can move dollars from one to another to get a better return on our dollar. And those are very practical and very appropriate conversations to have. But it's very different than trying to abolish or to completely defund and go away from policing.
Thank you. Chief Sosby, same question. Thoughts on the concept of defunding the police?
I believe honestly that defunding the police is truly a knee-jerk reaction to some problematic departments throughout our country that truly do have issues. And the quick, easy button was to just dismantle those departments. Captain Madsen said it earlier. You have to have a police force in your jurisdiction. You have to be able to have somebody to uphold the laws, to upkeep public safety, and all around keep our community safe. We would absolutely do ourselves a disservice if we defunded our police department. In the midst, we are right now in the midst of a violence epidemic, and the very thought of defunding any resources that are going towards public safety is quite frankly ludicrous. I don't understand the mentality behind it. Now, we've seen how defunding has gone in other cities where they've defunded their police department or reallocated funds away from their police department. And I agree with Captain Madsen. Our budgets are likely the biggest budgets in any city, any municipality, but it's for a good reason. And those are not dollars that are just being thrown away because safety is important, and it's the utmost important. Especially in my opinion. We had a slight push for defunding here in Lansing, but I believe cooler heads that have prevailed, and we now have that support back, and our community does support us. Our community want a good constitutional police department with fundamental fairness. Period. I know that because I've heard it, I've seen it. I have personally seen through community surveys that they want more police officers. We recently just had our funding passed for 5 additional police officers. It's clear that what the community wants is not defunding. And I can see that every day. And that's something that we need to push through our community and make sure that our officers know this, that their community supports them, that their city council supports them, that their mayor supports them, that they are appreciated, and they do understand the importance of our officers, our men and women of the Lansing Police Department, and how good a job they do. When I started in the Lansing Police Department, there were 265 officers. Today we're funded for 211. I don't believe in my heart that we will ever get back to 265 cops, and I don't know as if we need it, because we have been doing a pretty good job over the last few years with much less. Now, do we reallocate our resources, and I mean not monetary resources, but our internal resources to get the job done? Yes, we do. Our special assignments have changed. Our calls for service have changed. So we have to look at it in a different way. I had a wonderful conversation with a young lady not too long ago when we talked about what is true public safety. What does that look like? Does that look like a cop on every corner? I don't believe it does, because the mission is the same. How we get there is up to interpretation and perception. And my vision of public safety isn't necessarily 50 more cops. It'd be nice to have that, but I do see value, and I see a large value in social workers and clinicians. I'll give you an example. We mentioned it earlier. We have an uptick in violence in our young adults. Some of those go to school here in the Lansing School District. So you have an individual in that school district that you are sitting across from, that may have been involved in a crime that hurts your friend or family, or even worse. What type of learning environment is that? Not a very good one, I'll tell you that. So how do we do that? Oh, and by the way, they're 13, 14, 15 years old with normal issues that 13, 14, and 15-year-olds have. So do we need a cop, an officer to be in the school? Maybe we need a social worker. Maybe we need a clinician in there to help them, to give them somebody to talk to. Again, it all comes back to that holistic response of public safety. We are all heading towards the same mission. So defunding, reallocating, the perceptions and the definitions are arguable. I don't believe in defunding. I think, again, it's a reaction to some poorly run police departments and poorly trained police departments around our country. We do not have that in the city of Lansing. I also believe that we can also allocate some funding towards different aspects of our police department, like our social worker unit and clinicians to help out. So I do believe that the funding will pass, because you are seeing how defunding cities have implemented that and what they're dealing with now. And it's unrest, and people are unsafe, and people don't feel safe, and they leave. And that's just the simple fact of it. So hopefully we don't have to worry about defunding here in the city of Lansing, and I don't believe we do.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, so I want to be clear. This is the closing. I appreciate both candidates and their thoughts and ideas that they've shared. And just to be clear for those who are watching, our candidates, Interim Chief Sosby is an internal candidate, meaning he is a member of the Lansing Police Department, and Captain Matson is an external candidate, and he is from Bakersfield, California, with the Bakersfield Police Department. So, and this question will go first to Captain Matson. Based on what you know about the city of Lansing, please talk about why you're the best candidate to cultivate a trusting, dependable relationship between the police department and the community, and then tell us how you would develop this relationship and do that in less than 5 minutes. Thanks.
Okay. There again, I just want to kind of, as I open, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to even have the opportunity to be before you and share a little bit about who I am and what I believe in modern policing. As I was saying earlier, we have a tremendous opportunity in front of us. So where others see challenge, I see opportunity. And I think Lansing is the prime organization that this also feels and sees this. I think that this is a very good organization with a lot of good momentum. And so as compared to, as Chief Sosby has said, is that there are some other agencies across the United States that are really struggling and challenged. And this is not one of those agencies. And so it's only building on the good momentum that is already there. And so, what do I see moving forward is, there's a lot of opportunity with the, to capitalize on technology. So one of the areas I didn't get a chance, none of the questions really talked about, was the area of quality assurance. And so how do we know that we are being as responsive as we can as an agency? So looking at metrics of success and understanding it. So looking at, are we doing the things that we promised our community to do? Because if not, then that starts to give us areas to look at and improve. And so one of the areas that I've had the opportunity to establish here in Bakersfield, and I would definitely focus on establishing in Lansing, is the quality assurance unit. We'll often refer to a different term of professional standards units, but it really looks at trying to be responsive and looking at various metrics and then responding to that. And it's also working on the idea of transparency. So we have created a lot of different dashboards, you might say, of different statistics that go on about the performance of Lansing, or in this case Bakersfield, but would be for Lansing, for the community to be able to see, to be able to interact, and to be able to understand, and then be able to evaluate my performance as the chief. And so, that is something that's critical, anywhere from looking at how use of force is handled, how discipline is handled, looking at early intervention, concepts of early intervention, the training that goes on, the responsiveness and the response times of our officers and stuff, all kinds of different metrics of performance that would be outward facing for the community to be able to look at, to see, to assess, and to understand. That's one of the critical areas, I think, that goes towards building additional trust, is that you have to have the ability to be able to see what's going on, to hold me accountable. And I'm comfortable, and I invite that. And I would invite that as Lansing's chief. Continuing to move forward, it starts there. Once we have the dialogues, once we build the relations, that will have to happen, as you said very well, Gary, is I am coming from the outside. I'm coming from clear across the country. And so I'm not going to have all of the immediate internal understandings of Lansing and Lansing's perspective. But I think with that creates another opportunity. I'm coming in, as I said earlier, a guy that is going to be very critical in the sense of coming in with a critical eye, not to judge and not to criticize, but to understand, and to understand the whys, and to talk and to really learn. Not listen to respond, but listen to learn. Listen to all the wonderful things that are going on in the thoughts, and then have dialogue and discussion. Building internally and working with the internal candidate, the internal department, as well as working with the internal stakeholders. One of the things I would be focused on very quickly would be establishing a path forward, a strategic plan. And so I would want to put together a committee of internal and external stakeholders to help put that together and to be able to help drive that forward. What does it look like for Lansing for the next 3 to 5 years, based on everything that's going on, based on the environmental factors? It's going to help me get very much educated into a lot of these different things that I know I'm going to have to get educated into. And so I think it would be critically important for me to be able to do so. And it would help also for people to be able to hear and to get to know and understand a little bit more about me as an individual and what I stand for. So I think that would be the path forward. And so that's what I would say on the technical side. But as I'm talking about how, to cultivate the trust in the relationships, is, I didn't talk on my opening about who I am. I am a father. I have 2 daughters. I've been married for 18 years, been with my wife for 20 years. I've known her pretty much all my life, and has been one of my good and best friends for my entire life. So I come as a very solid candidate in the sense of a solid, stable value. I don't bring shame or discredit or harm, with my actions or anything else. I would not, tarnish the good name of Lansing by doing so. I'm an educator, and I have spent many years teaching at Cal State Bakersfield, and I would continue to try to do so out there, because I truly believe that education is the path forward for success. It has helped me, as I said, as a person growing up as a single family home with a very loving and supportive mother that made this happen for me. And it was my education that allowed me to even have the opportunity to be able to sit here, because if not, I could have just as easily been on another path in life. And so I believe wholeheartedly that education is the path forward. And I would continue to advocate that both externally to our stakeholders, but also internally into being a well-trained force because I believe that a well-trained force becomes a very diverse and critical thinking force that goes back to those concepts of procedural justice that are so important and allows us to have a very good and robust relationship with the community. I would encourage our community, I would encourage our officers and our professional staff to get out there and to do what they love. You know, when we talk about how do we deal with staffing shortages, you know, is show the hearts, the vulnerabilities that we are human, both sworn and professional at Lansing or here in Bakersfield, and be able to share that and to be able to share who we are, to share our philosophies and share our beliefs, because that becomes the best recruiting tool. I've recruited more people out of my interactions in education than I ever have as an officer, because you only see me transactional as an officer. You don't get to know me or my heart, you know, as much. And so those type of opportunities, I think, are so critical to having a well blended relationship with the community. And that would be what I would encourage as part of our culture, and would definitely move forward as Lancy's next chief. So thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you, Chief Sosby, for allowing me to be able to speak with you today. And I've appreciated hearing your thoughts as well. And thank you.
Thank you, Captain Matson. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Chief Sosby, in a closing, based on what you know about Lansing, please talk about why you're the best candidate to cultivate a trusting, dependable relationship between the department and the community, and then tell us how you develop this relationship, and then tell us anything else you want to tell us for the next 5 minutes. All right.
Hopefully it won't take 5 minutes. I'll tell you how to cultivate relationships is the first part that we need to understand is the relationships themselves. You have to be present. You have to be there. You have to have these conversations. And Captain Matson said it. Those are hard conversations to have. You have to be willing to do that. And, you know, I have done that, and I will continue to do that. Those are hard conversations that nobody wants to have, but they need to be had there. It's a necessity for us to grow and move forward. We have to continue to be transparent. Well, I've made strides since I've been interim chief to be more transparent. And I believe that there are more that needs to get done, because that's what truly the community wants. They want an officer to come when they call. They want the officer to be nice, and they want transparency of their police department and their officers. And I know that because that's what I'm told by our community members. And we have to be accountable. There are things that happen that we are held accountable to, that we need to be held accountable to. And we also need to show that we do not make exceptions, and that this, you know, we're held to that higher standard. I have a strategic plan in place that I will implement if I become the chief of police in 2022. And it's built by input, by collaboration, by partnerships, community partnerships, our federal partners, the captains and the lieutenants of the Lansing Police Department, all this input to come through on our strategic plan. And then once that's done, this document will then, I will take out to the community and get their input, because this is their police department. It's not mine, it's not the mayor, it's not city councils, it's the community police department. Without their input, how do we expect to be a well-driven and a well-oiled machine for them to keep them safe? It's not realistic without community input. Look, we are in the midst of reform, police reform. We are in the middle of a COVID pandemic. We are in the middle of an opioid epidemic. We are in the middle of a national hiring crisis and a national crisis with violence and guns. I say all that to say this. I am a trusted person of this police department. I am battle tested. I can assure you that the last 2 years have gotten me there. I have relationships in place that I've worked on for over 20 years in this police department, and I will continue to grow those relationships. I have already implemented reform measures within our police department as a captain and as an interim chief. I believe I have the support of our community. I believe I have the support of my department, the unions, the city council, and the police board of commissioners. I am here for all the right reasons. I'm not here to become a chief. I'm here to lead this organization to success. I don't settle for status quo. If anybody says that's just the way we've always done it, they all know that's not a favorable thing to say in my presence, because I hate that. We are here for success. And once we gain success, we cannot stop. we find the best practice today, we can't give up tomorrow and say, oh, we found the best practice, because tomorrow there's a better way of doing it. There's always a better way of doing it. I know what's worked in Lansing. I know what hasn't worked in Lansing. If I'm the next chief of police, I will continue the path set by previous administrators and previous chiefs and leadership, mayors, city council members, community leaders, faith-based leadership. We continue to do this, we will fulfill the mission of Lansing Police Department and get to where we need to be as a police department and as a city. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank Captain Madsen. I appreciate all his input as well. And thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Chief Sosby. Appreciate it. And on behalf of the city of Lansing, both candidates, Mayor Shore and his office, I want to thank those who attended the forum tonight and remind everyone to make sure you share the information that you learned tonight with your neighbors, your friends, and your family, and remind them that the event can be viewed on Facebook and YouTube at a later time on demand. And really appreciate everyone tuning in. This concludes the event, and thank you very much.